Um, the title is The Transformed Snake in Jung's Red Book. And this is a subject, this snake keeps crawling. I actually has given a Tuesday lunch about it before, but it's did many new things in the meantime. It was a few years ago. I just want to say something about the eras before we start. Most of you probably know about it, but it's a picture archive on the 3rd floor. It's open to the public, and you can come and visit it on Mondays and Wednesdays when it's open. And we also have the archive online, and you can get brochures at the front door, how you become a member, if you are not already. And we have a wonderful program. So it's an archive of art and symbols and mythology, if you don't know. So we have a program for teenagers in the summer, 2 weeks, and they come in and do art after having chosen a symbol that they work on for 2 weeks. And it's amazing to see the work they do and how that symbol sort of grows during those 2 weeks. So it's a sort of a teaching tool almost to see what one can do with working with symbols like in dreams and so on. And I just want to show the book that we published a couple of years ago, 5 years ago actually. It's still on Taschen's bestseller list after this year's, which is great. And they, as Janet said, it's on sale in the bookstore. And with that, and I also brought Jung's Red Book. I felt had to be here. It's such a magnificent book. So it's standing there with the snake in front of it. So, as I said, I will follow the snake. And this is, maybe introduce the image on the wall. This is the first image in the book, the first letter. You know, they illustrated the letters in old manuscripts, and that's the way it's written. And you may not be able to see in the back, but the snake starts down here and crawls all the way up. Through water realm in the bottom, earth and city and heaven, and up you see the sun and the moon, and you also see some of the astrological signs, which I think is wonderful. So all the elements are present. There were 2 ideas that sort of reshaped my thinking about the soul, the snake. And one was soul, because Jung writes right through about soul and his relationship to soul. And the other one was image. And that's partly why I really love Jung, because he was the one who brought back the idea of image, the archetypal image, the symbol. He called it many, many things during his lifetime. He called them primordial image, archetypal image, universal image, and my favorite is eternal image, because they make up the structure of the psyche and also form a strange kind of memory reaching back to even before the dawn of humankind. The Red Book starts with a quote by Jung. The wealth of the soul exists in images. And then it continues. And everything to come was already in images. Actually, the first quote in the Red Book is this, where he says, "The years of which I have spoken to you when I pursued the inner images were the most important time of my life." So he really valued image and knew the gifts they could give. And I want to read a poem by William Carlos Williams, who also suggests how important these inner images are. They come to us, whether they come to us as dreams, longings, hopes, fear, or poetry. But William Carlos Williams points to what happens when we are not in touch with our inner images. And this is what he says. "It is difficult to get news from poems, yet men die miserably from the lack thereof. I like to read poems twice because it's hard to get that the first time. So I read it again. It's difficult to get news from poems, yet men die miserably from the lack thereof. I like to use poetry to talk about images because poetry is really image in words. Images in poetry are called metaphors, and it's a lovely Greek word that means carried or moved from one place to another. And when we are moved, something has happened, something has changed. We are no longer the same. So images not only bring their own kind of news, as the poets like to think, they are also transformers. The Jungian analyst Marie-Louise from France believed that images know something that we don't. I think that's fascinating. Like it comes to us as an image before we know it, understand it. We can see images as seeds opening up to new possibilities. And Meister Eckhart, the German mystic philosopher, describes it this way. When the soul wants to experience something, she throws out an image in front of her and steps into the image. And that's what we'll do today. We'll step into the image of the snake. And to introduce the snake, I want to read another poem, or part of a poem, written by Emily Dickinson. The poem is called A Narrow Fellow in the Grass. But never met this fellow, attended or alone, without a tighter breathing and zero at the bone. I read it again. But never met this fellow, attended or alone, without a tighter breathing and zero at the bone. We hold our breath when we see a snake, we freeze, but never met this fellow, attended or alone, without a tighter breathing and zero at the bone. With these few lines, the poet is able to evoke the fear most of us feel, should we ever meet a snake. It's been a long time since I saw one. Actually, I've heard we had a snake at the house we have in Sweden that had come back, a black snake, so I was very happy to hear that.
Happy?
Yes! I'm very happy. These days I really like them. It seems like no other animal brings out our dark fear like the way snakes do. Even seeing a picture of a snake can make us shudder like this one. It is so totally other. We can see this feeling of the other in this image where the snake is so much larger than the man. It's a bronze carving on a rock in Sweden, and it probably is about that size. I saw it a couple of summers ago. It was wonderful. And you can see how the body winds like energy or life force. And the red color says the same, and the sun, of course. And this is the greeting to the sun. And you can see the whole man is awake, even his erect phallus. So it's really, really powerful image. And I've had that on my wall for a long, long, long time upstairs. And as you may know, most of the Greek gods or goddesses and heroes have a snake form. Zeus, Dionysus, Demeter, Athena, Asclepius, of course, Hercules, Hermes, Hades, and even Apollo can appear as a snake or have a snake accompanying him. So our fear of snakes may be appropriate in another way, as it turns out that we are meeting an immortal. And here we see Zeus in one of his snake forms. This is Zeus Meliccius in his chthonic earthly form. And in front of him you can see a group of worshippers, much, much smaller than the snake. The many ways we have seen this snake seems endless, but this is one of the aspects I want to bring in today. And that is the snake as a healer, which feels very important in connection with the Red Book, as we will see. This is Asclepius, the Greek god. Actually, it's a Roman coin, so he moved into Roman culture as well. And he was called to prevent pestilence from spreading, and he arrives in a boat on the river Tigris here, coming in under a bridge. And here we see him again. This is a Greek relief. And you see, this is Asclepius standing on the far left. And he's healing or doing something with the shoulder of his patient standing in front of him. And then there is a second version of the god in the back. And now he is a snake. And here the snake is touching his shoulder, or licking, or whatever he does. So it's like a comic strip, shows it in two different forms. I never forget the story that I read when I first came here many years ago by Robert Johnson, who is a Jungian analyst, and he described something that happened to one of his patients, a woman, and she had dreamt that she saw in her dream a snake coming into the hospital room. Her son had meningitis and was really, really sick and was lying in a bed. And she saw the snake crawling over the floor and jumping up on the bed and finally kind of biting or touching his forehead. And she was so freaked out. So she called her analyst in the morning, and he said, "Calm down, I think he's going to be well because the god has visited him." And it turned out that the fever turned that night. Snakes can also guide us when we feel lost, which Barbara Hanna, the old Jungian analyst who worked with Jung, reminds us when she says that a seemingly hopeless situation might be solved could we descend into and be guided by the sympathetic nervous system, where the serpent knows the way which we have lost. And of course, that is what Jung does himself in the Red Book, which we will come to in a minute. But I want to turn a little bit to the living snakes because they are so amazing. And so many formed, or so many appearances. They almost seem mythical. The strange, beautiful diamond patterns, their skin, their size. A snake can be as small as a finger or as large as a tree. They can live in almost any terrain, from desert to water. They hear with their entire body. They smell with the tongue, and the tongue is forked like Satan. They can unhinge their jaw, so they can swallow an animal much larger than themselves, making them seem like a mythical monster. They digest their food without chewing, without teeth, by crushing it against their backbone until it's broken down to enough to digest. They lost their legs. They did have legs long back in prehistoric times, when they found that it was easier to hide safely underground without their legs. The snake copulates for days with one snake or 50 at once. Not only their tongue, but also their penis and clitoris are forked, evoking the seduction in paradise, the creative word and sexuality. The snake lays eggs, gives birth live, or self-clones. Many ways to procreate. And it sheds its skin, which then supposedly keeps shedding eternity after eternity. And of course that's why we also think that a snake lives forever, because it keeps shedding its skin and it becomes anew, and it renews itself that way. So it's easy to see how the snake attracts our projections. The snake is said to be the one of the first symbols depicted, and also the most common of all symbols. So the way the snake appeared in the beginning of images ever were like this zigzag, which is the line of energy, but it's also a line of water and snake. And I just like to connect to the archive upstairs. There are 2 drawers that contain only one symbol, and one is the snake, and the other is Christ. So I think that's an interesting combination. And that brings up another fascinating aspect of the symbolism of the snake. I want to quote James Hillman from his book Dream Animals, where he says that the snake, this is really interesting, the snake is always a both and. Both creative and destructive, both male and female, poisonous and healing, dry, moist, spiritual, material, and many other irreconcilable opposites. And he continues, the snake is the unconscious psyche, the inward turning energy that goes back and down. End quote. There is a certain snake and a snake remedy in alchemy called lachesis, L-A-C-H-E-S-I-S, if someone wants to try it. It illustrates this aspect in a very particular way. It points to the unlived life. And this is where the Red Book begins. We get back to the beginning of the Red Book again. At one point, Jung realized that he has achieved everything that he had searched for. As he says himself, honor, power, wealth, and knowledge, and every human happiness. Yet, he finds that none of this gives him any joy. He has lost all his desire for life. He knows that he has lost his way. He's just 40, and it is his life story that becomes the beginning of what we today call the midlife crisis, which he turned into a theory at the end, to add. And it's a time when we, all of us, most of us at least, begin to question what is our life about. The more we have left out, the more that is unlived, the more painful. It's probably not a coincidence that a snake appears on the very first image in the book, crawling on the eternal wave on the first letter of the first chapter, as I said. And the chapter is called The Way Which Is to Come. The snake who knows the unknown, the darkness, and the underworld. The snake that killed the innocents in the Garden of Eden. It is easy to see this snake on the letter D as on the tree of good and evil in the Bible. But here the snake wears, I don't know if you can see that, a golden crown. the symbol of light and sun and reaching up into the heavens. At the same time, we can see the tail, the snake's tail is dipping into a hellish-looking cauldron deep below in darkness. You almost have to go up and look at that. So here the snake forms a bridge between above and below, heaven and hell, light and darkness. And I can't help showing this slide, and I have shown this before, but I think it's so intriguing. It comes from Greek geometry, where the ancient Greeks believed they didn't believe, they saw creating geometrical form as a symbol for creation of life. And so you put a compass at the dot, and the dot is the beginning of all creation, like our Big Bang, and the dot Bindu in Hinduism, and so on. And then you create another circle, and the only way you can create a new form is you can't do anything but doing circles with the compass, but you can make the circle mirror itself. You can reflect on yourself psychologically. If we reflect on ourselves, we also know new things. And there is this shape in the middle. And I love that they actually used, constantly used natural words for whatever they did. So the line across is called the stem. The first circle is the mother, the second circle is the father. And why I'm saying all of this is because these two circles symbolize all the opposites that we live in. Our world is a world of opposites. Everything has its opposite. Up is down, black and white, bad and good and bad, and so on and so forth. So, and just finalize, I don't have an image, but if you draw a line from the 2 points up to where the 2 circles meet at the top, it forms a triangle, and that's the Greeks call the first geometric form, and they call it the child, which I think is lovely. From the mother and father, and they create the child. And it's a symbol of the mystery of all new life. Throughout the Red Book, there is this pairing and dialogue between opposites, between known and unknown, between sense and nonsense, between Jung and his soul. So, and where there is this dialogue, a bridge is formed, as we saw before on the letter D. I think they come a little bit out of order here, but that's fine. We should have seen. Let's see if it goes back. Nope. Here. I want to read a poem about this bridge from heaven to hell, above and below. It's called In Between, and it's written by the Mexican poet Octavio Paz. And I have read this poem too, but I love this poem, so I think we can hear it again. In between what I see and what I say, in between what I say and I keep silent, in between what I keep silent and what I dream, in between what I dream and I forget. Poetry. I read it again. In between what I see and what I say, in between what I say and I keep silent, in between what I keep silent and what I dream, in between what I dream and I forget. Poetry. We can see poetry as a symbol, also a symbol for all creative work. Poetry or song was probably the first art form, just as all small children are poets. Poetry is something that exists between word and image. It's neither one nor the other, even if it has aspects of both. Poetry is something completely new. And then we can go back to our dove that we saw before. And it is this dialogue Jung has with the unknown, his unconscious, beginning with him talking to his soul. He's shown as a traditional white dove. That's how we usually think about it. And he says, I'm quoting from the Red Book, he says to his soul, where are you? I call you. Are you there? After long years of wandering, I have come to you again. At the same time, he also knows that he has spent much time thinking about the soul. He knows many learned words for the soul, but he has judged her and turned her into a scientific object, or as he now calls it, a dead system. And on the way, he lost his soul. He realizes that he has to find out, he realizes he has to feed his soul, or it breeds dragons and devils in the heart, as he says. I think many of us knows what that means. And here, which I find so amazing. So here's the white dove of the soul, and here at the bottom, a black snake, also an image of the soul. In time, Jung learns that even the soul has opposing sides, taking the form of a bird and snake, the eternal opposites in the animal world, with the human soul in between, S, a symbol for the soul. This is already suggested in the third image in the book, as if intimating the later development. This is the third image. And for the next 29 nights, he spent his night during this time when the Red Book came into being. He talks to his soul and realizes the scorn he has felt for all that his soul represents. He learns that he must serve her. And finally, having lived without her, he finds that all of his intellectual pursuits that he had valued so much had turned his life into a desert, as he said. And painting. Here he is, in the desert. Almost like a Ouroboros, he can't get out of it. Within the letter D again, that's the German for the. It begins with a D. And he says, I didn't know that my soul is barren, hot, desert, dusty, and without a drink. Why is myself a desert? Have I lived too much of myself in men and events? The scorching sun of the intellect, the burning thoughts of rationality, leave no rest, no moisture. And then he says, the wealth of the soul exists in images, which is what I quoted at the beginning. And everything to come was already in images, meaning in his imagination, basically. He then compares his experience of the desert with the monks of the early Christianity who also went into the desert to find their soul, if you remember from school, maybe. And but the difference, they had to live out this vision they had in reality. They had to be out in the desert. Whereas Jung realizes something tremendous, that living it out symbolically is just as real, which I think is quite a different understanding. And I think this is what the beautiful expression, living a symbolic life, means. But it took Jung many long nights talking to his soul to get to that insight. First, he had to free himself of what his view of the soul had been, which was a world beyond all that he had valued. his thoughts, his intellect and knowledge. That's what he liked. As he overcame his scorn of his soul, which is a very strong word, scorn of his soul, he says that, uses that, and began to serve it. Instead, he said, I was near my soul, and she could speak to me, and I was soon to see the desert becoming green. But it doesn't take long before another confrontation awaits him. He finds himself falling into the opposite of the bright light of the desert. He falls into the dark cave of black water. He hears shrieking voices, and he's afraid that he's going mad, truly mad. He sees a luminous red stone that you can see to the very right, and he knows he must pick it up and listen to the voices in the opening where it was placed. He's afraid to do it, but he does. He wants to know something, he knows something is to be uttered, so he places his head in the opening and he hears the underground waters, and he sees the bloody head of a man on the dark stream, someone wounded, someone slain, floats there. He takes in this image for a long time, shuddering. He sees a black scarab, can you see that in the middle? Yes. Floating past, and in the deepest reach of the stream shines a red sun through the water, and a terror seizes him. 1,000 small black snakes begin to crowd around the sun, trying to veil the sun. A stream of red, thick blood springs up, surging for a long time, ebbing. He is seized by fear and asks himself, what did he see? He knows that his own thoughts that howl like hounds around him, and it's only his own thoughts that howl like hounds around him. And he has sworn to follow his soul even into madness, which I think is great courage. He knows he must not judge his visions. He sees I love this part. He sees judgment as a big black snake full of poison. I think that's a good image to remember when we judge ourselves. And he doesn't yet know, but what he has seen will become major themes in his future, rest of his life. He will write about this vision. The death of the solar hero, as the man who floats here, the rebirth of the new sun with the red light of Eros, not just intellect, reborn with the help of the scarab, which in ancient Egypt raised the sun every morning, according to the Egyptians. And the 1,000 black snakes as his own thoughts resisting the new sun to be born, or the new consciousness. I think I skipped. This is just an image of, basically, in his book, of the two circles, two opposites coming together, and he fights with what he's just learned. No. Keep with that. Jung realizes that it was his journey from the desert into hell that brought the first inkling of a new God image, which was to be born, as he says, in the relative, meaning a God that can see both sides of this, both good and evil, both black and white, everything. We don't push half of it out, the parts that we don't like, the darkness, all the unpleasant sides, and so on. And I cannot help go back to the symbolism of the snake where we started, which contains all opposites as well, both creative and destructive, both poisonous and healing. This is when Jung meets the first human figure in the Red Book. He meets an old man, and you probably heard this many times, but I love this story. I mean, it's so amazing in what it symbolizes. And a young woman who will be with him for the rest of his life, especially the old man. We will come to see how they embody two opposites within himself. The old man tells him that he is the prophet Elijah, and that the young woman is his daughter, who he says is Salome. He is from the Old Testament, she from the New Testament. And in between, you have to get very close up or go and look at the book to see that there is a black snake lying between them, as if uniting them both. It is as if the image, or even the snake in the image, knows something that Jung doesn't know yet. How these opposing parts of him will be reconciled. On one side, the wise old man whom Jung highly values, and the other one which he fears immensely, even despises, and has always kept away from himself. Jung is horrified when he hears who the woman is. Salome, the daughter of Herod, she who killed John the Baptist, a holy man, by having his head cut off. And the first thing she asks him is if he loves her. And Jung is outraged. How could he love her? How could she, a pagan, be the daughter of the wise prophet? He can't figure it out. Makes no sense to him. We learn also that she's blind because she cannot see meaning in things. That didn't appeal to Jung exactly either. She loves pleasure, and she lives only through her feelings. He thinks she's mad, and he calls her evil. Jung feels much more comfortable with Elijah, obviously, who lives in his mind, in his thoughts. But from this experience, from this first meeting, Jung extracts his theory also of typology. And I love how he later expresses his insights about the opposite types. And he says, what a thinker doesn't think, he believes doesn't exist. And what a feeler doesn't feel, he believes doesn't exist, of course, and it becomes a foreign and dangerous way. And that was Jung. He felt that was dangerous to get into your feelings. I think it's our culture's way, very much. Even no matter what typology we have at the bottom. So as Jung is brought by his longing to meet Elijah and Salome on the following night again, they meet, and the black snake lies before them. There's no picture of this. Jung complains that he's tired, his head is heavy as lead. Again, that is suggestion he lives too much in his head, always trying to achieve something. Elijah then tells him something surprising, something that probably surprises us all. That when Jung thinks his thoughts are his own, he confuses them, his thoughts, with himself. They're not the same. When in fact, Elijah explains further, his thoughts are outside himself, just as trees and animals are outside the body. So we think we make up our thoughts, says Jung. I find that fascinating. But they come to us, he says it somewhere else, like animals in the forest, people in a room, or birds in the air. So, then Jung sees a golden red flame around an altar, a round altar. Actually, there are no images of this. I'm sorry, so I have no images to show, but it's so visual, his description of it. The snake has now encircled the flame. Its eyes glitter with golden reflections. It's the snake that you see between them. Where did it go? Oh, so this is dramatic. So he sees also a black snake and another snake, which is white, lying on either side of Elijah. So these two snakes started terrible wrestling, the black and the white. And first Jung thinks that the black snake is going to win. Then suddenly something happens and the black snake turns back a little bit and starts to become white. The upper part of the black snake is now white. And they stop wrestling. And that's how that scene ends. When Jung asks Elijah what this means, he begins to see again a series of terrifying visions. They end with Salome screaming, "I see light." She is no longer blind. She can see. And Jung begins to see a new way, perhaps suggested by the black snake turning white, where feelings that he had despised for so long no longer are blind or meaningless pleasures, but are becoming the love of wisdom, and his previous life of the mind and pure thinking alone is no longer hollow and without love. This is where Liber Primus, the first book, ends. I want to read the last words of the book that began with image and ends with image. The mystery showed me in images what I should afterward live. I did not possess any of these boons that the mystery showed me. I still had to earn all of them. End of quote. The snake, image and soul have led him this far, and the transformation then continues in the second book, the Liber Secundus, where he creates his own new cosmos. But before I end, I would like to read a poem about the soul that describes his journey. It's written by Coleridge, and it begins his autobiography, Jung's autobiography, Memories, Dreams, and Reflections. He looked at his own soul with a telescope. What seemed all irregular, he saw and showed to be beautiful constellations, and he added to the consciousness hidden worlds within worlds. I read it again. He looked at his own soul with a telescope. What seemed all irregular, he saw and showed to be beautiful constellations, and he added to the consciousness hidden worlds within worlds. Thank you.